reflect on it or use it to improve in future tasks. Now for the problem statement, we also have 2 points. The first one.
Okay, so now we're going to cover the research questions and the research objectives that we have for our project. So the first one, we have the main question, that is, what are the students' perceptions of using gamified tools for assessment and feedback compared to traditional methods in an English as a foreign language classroom? And its main compared to traditional methods in an English as a foreign language classroom. And about the specific question and specific objectives, we have how the students compare the clarity and usefulness of feedback received through gamified tools to traditional methods. And its objective is to examine the students' perceptions of the clarity and usefulness of feedback provided through gamified tools and traditional assessment methods in an EFL classroom. And finally, we have what challenges do students report when using gamified tools for assessment and feedback. And its objective, the objective is to identify the challenges the students report when using gamified tools for assessment and feedback in an EFL classroom.
Now we will briefly explain the main concepts that support this study. We have 3 main concepts that are assessment, feedback, and gamification. The first one is assessment, that according to Widiastuti et al. Is a tool that helps teachers understand their students' learnings and also students' objectives, and also to learn how they can improve in future tasks and students' ability and understanding about the material that is taught.
Then moving on to feedback, we have that according to Vives and Varela, it is the ability of the teacher to provide information to the students in order to control the learning process, how they are developing in the process.
Our last context is gamification, that is the use of gamified tools in non-game context. In our study, we used Kahoot and Wayground, and we can say that these tools are part of gamification because they use points, colors, music, rankings. So those are characteristics of gamification.
Okay, so now we're going to move on our research paradigm. That is, the first one is the constructivist paradigm that it seeks to emphasize on people's subjective experiences, right? And then we have the type of approach that we went to a mixed approach study in which we can get all information from the both types of collecting information, the qualitative and quantitative, in order to get more the data and also the meanings of the collection. And then we have the type of research that, according to Levin's approach, it seeks to emphasize in the problems and also situations that practitioners face in their practitioner contexts.
Now we will move to the context and data collection. We developed our study at a binational center here in Bogota. The participants were 10 students that were selected for convenience because they were our own students, and they were between 14 and 18 years old, according to the Common European Framework of Reference with a B2 level of English. And the instruments that we used to collect the data were 3: surveys, focus group, and interviews.
Then we have the theory of learning and the theory of language. So the first theory of learning is, according to Salem et al., is a collaborative approach that promotes students' participation, interaction, and knowledge sharing. And the theory of language is a social interaction skill that it emphasizes that language learning is shaped through interaction, making collaborative and communicative activities essential for development according to Matisse and McKenna. Both theories are connected to our study as the use of Kahoot and Wayground promote interaction, sharing knowledge, and also competition, and this concept that the learning is shaped through shared experiences.
Okay, continuing with the pedagogical intervention, at the pedagogical level, we had 3 main objectives. The first one was to identify strengths and weaknesses in grammar and vocabulary through gamified assessment. Our second objective was to reflect on feedback from teachers, peers, and digital tools to improve performance. And the final objective was to engage in interactive tasks that promote motivation and participation. About the intervention, we can say that we developed 4 sessions in 4 weeks, each session with 100 minutes each. 2 sessions were developed using Kahoot and 2 with Wayground. So the general idea was to change the traditional assessment or to replace the traditional assessment to digital assessment tasks using our tools, Kahoot and Vagrant, and to have a final moment of reflection and feedback with students.
So now we're moving on the structure of the lesson. So besides having the warm-up, the communicative moments, and also project work, our sessions at the National Center were constituted by two cycles, the language cycle and the assessment cycle. The first one is composed by the exposure, in which the student is exposed to the grammar objective for the lesson. Then we go for the analysis part, that it is meant to be taught inductively. And then we go to the control practice, in which the grammar is evaluated, if the students got it or if not. And then we have the pre-practice. In this stage of the cycle, we start the assessment cycle, in which we give the criteria for the assessment activity that, in our case, we use, depending on the day, Kahoot or Waker. And then we have the feedback and explanation, finally, to close with the action plan in order to help the students to use the feedback for taking advantage of it for improving their abilities with the grammar exams.
Now we will briefly explain the process of the data analysis. We started by the preparation and organization of the information collected using our three instruments: surveys, focus group, and interviews. So the process was like this. We started with the surveys, but before conducted the final survey, we conducted a pilot survey to two students to know if questions were clear or not. After making some adjustments, we conduct the final survey with the whole group and with the 10 students. And after that, we continue with the focus group. The focus group was with all the students, and it was to learn more about their experiences, how they feel with using Kahoot and Wagon in the assessment process, and also for feedback. And the final part of that organization of the information were the interviews. We selected, according to the focus group results, we selected 3 students to conduct individual interviews through Zoom. And the surveys were conducted through Google Forms.
Okay, then after that preparation and organization of the information that, of course, we follow the process according to Libby, we started the initial measure phase in which we took preliminary notes based on the recordings, on the extracts, but we were reading and rereading the information in order to get all the data that necessary for our staff. After that, we started with the inductive coding process, in which for all the information that we have from the previous stage, we organize it into levels for jumping on to the cyclical process of analysis.
And after that inductive coding process, we also coded the information that we had in the 3 instruments, from the 3 instruments, and that was the cyclical process of analysis, because from that we have like broader categories. And finally, to strengthen the validity of our findings, we also did a data triangulation comparing the findings that we had in each element through the color coding strategy.
So now we're moving on the findings, in which we organize them in a way that every category that we mentioned before could answer a question from ours. So then we have the first question is, what are the students' perceptions of using gamified tools for assessment and feedback compared to traditional methods and uses of foreign language classroom? And the category that answers this question is gamified assessment as a catalyst for motivation, interaction, and learning. Our students were really amazed of using Kahoot for feedback and for assessment, and they were really motivated, and also the findings that we have also can report this concept of that learning is a shared process. So according to that, we have that our students mentioned in the different tools that, for example, Sarah in the focus group.
Kahoot helps us a lot with teamwork. You learn faster with your classmates.
And then we have Julian in the interview that he said,
So many stimuli, competition, it makes you put in more effort. You retain the topics much better. It helps you remember the topic more. Now we continue with the second category that we have from that to answer that same question, and it's contrasting assessment approaches, interactive and traditional methods. Here we found that even though students consider Kahoot and Wayground as interactive and useful tools for practice, they did not consider them for formal evaluation. And for example, during the interview, Luisa mentioned,
I prefer paper-based ones. I will feel it more like a real test and not so much like a game. In the apps, they give you hints. In real life, that doesn't happen in an exam.
and Sandra in the interview as well added,
It depends. If we have just seen a topic, Kahoot. But for an evaluative criterion, the traditional exam is more important. I feel more evaluated with the traditional ones. Okay, and then we have the next question, that is how do students compare the clarity and usefulness of feedback received through gamified tools to traditional methods? And the category that answers this question is integration of digital and traditional feedback, a combined approach. Our students, they enjoyed their time using the Kahoot and Wayground for assessment and feedback, but they also highlighted that they needed teachers' guidance in order to have a deeper explanation, a deeper feedback practice. So then we have that Sandra in the interview mentioned.
I think it's a combination. The platform, in this case Kahoot, is super immediate, but you need someone to explain why feedback from both is better.
And then Julian in the interview also added.
The game, Wayground, only gives you the screen with the explanation. You don't really read it. Instead, the teacher gives a deeper explanation. It helps much more. Now, our last question was, what challenges do students report when using gamified tools for assessment and feedback? And the category name is challenges and limitations of gamifications. Even though students consider those tools motivational, interactive, and good for the learning processes, they also, the data reveals some challenges and limitations. So we have the first one that was related to technical and connectivity issues was the most common one. And Julian, during the interview, mentioned,
it depends on having a good connection or equipment. If the platform locks you out, it is complicated to re-enter.
And Sandra, also during the interview, mentioned,
having access to all the quizzes would be great, knowing which answers I got wrong. The platforms really lack that.
Sandra mentioned that, referring to limitations in feedback and access to assessment results. Then, in relation with the stress and anxiety associated with time pressure and competition, Julian in the focus group mentioned,
in each Kahoot question, there is a time limit to answer. And you also feel the pressure because everyone else has already answered, and you're still thinking. And then the question is like, I am the last one to answer. I have to answer something now. And now to conclude this presentation, we have our conclusions. So then we have that the first one, one of the most important ones for our study, is that the students demonstrated a critical perspective toward both gamified and traditional assessment. Considering that our students were amazed, they really enjoyed their time using Kahoot and Wayground for assessment and feedback, they also valued the traditional ones. They were like, okay, this is good, and Kahoot and Wayground are good, but we also need to have the paper-based ones. And also, this is from in previous studies that we consulted for our research, we found that authors, for example, like Ebade et al., they mentioned that the traditional methods are not valuable anymore.
our second conclusion is gamified tools enhance motivation, interaction, and engagement. And this is true that students consider these tools, specifically Kahoot and Wayground, as tools that can help them with the motivation, with the interaction and engagement during the classes, and also to improve participation.
Then the next one is traditional assessment and gamified tools are perceived as complementary rather than opposing. As we were mentioning before, our students were like, okay, we like Kahoot and Wayground, but we also need the traditional ones. So it is. So we conclude this one also for enhancing this feedback and assessment process, since our students really need both. Having the immediate feedback from the screen and also the teacher participation in order to reinforce all the things we're doing.
And as we mentioned during the findings, immediate feedback is valuable, but teachers' guidance remains essential. Here, students value the feedback that is provided by the tools, quizzes, and Wayground because it's immediate. They answer and they immediately receive the feedback. But they mentioned that they consider also important the reflection with the teacher because they can understand better the topic and go deeper to, well, have deeper explanations of the topic they have.
Okay, and finally we have that gamification presents different challenges. As Cielo was mentioning before, things like connectivity issues, stress and anxiety, those challenges are really some limitations in order to apply these strategies in Kahoot and Wayland.
Thank you for your attention. We will be happy to answer your questions. Yes?
Well, regarding waiver for only quizzes, I have a question about some settings you can activate. That ones are each question after each question you a meme is presented on the screen, and also you can activate the setting to use some kind of powers or advantages with, for example, double jeopardy or double points, freestyle, etc. The question is, what do you think of that setting is as an advantage or a disadvantage?
According to what our students mentioned in the focus group and the interviews, they consider those tools more as a way to practice the topic that they are learning, but not to be evaluated like a formal assessment or a formal evaluation to get a final grade. They consider useful, as you were mentioned, because it's dynamic, you can double points, it's fun, it also promotes participation in the classroom, but it's an advantage for practice, but they do not like to be evaluated through those tools for a final assessment.
Yes, and finally, adding to that, is that one of our students mentioned that in real, you are not going to be evaluated by the life in a playground quiz. So then the power-ups are kind of disadvantage since it is for a formal evaluation. So that's what Cielo was mentioning, just for like practice.
So, did you guys find any complications or difficulties during the implementation part?
Well, during the implementation, we found three main limitations. The first one was connectivity. You know that not all students have, well, they had access to internet, but sometimes connectivity was a problem because the platform was not working well, or students, the platform lag out. And the second one was that we used the free versions of Kahoot and Wayground, so we didn't have the opportunity to explore those tools like good because they were the free versions. You know that Kahoot and Wayground in free versions only offer some tools like equations, open-ended question, but we would like maybe in the future explore those tools with more options.
And also another limitation that we found was also that I mentioned the 2 cycles that we have for per class, right? But that is not the only thing that we did in the sessions. We have other moments, and also we have this time pressure of the students logging in the platform. So that was also a limitation since we don't have the whole time for having all the intervention.
Well, first, I congratulate you because I think you have spoken about something teachers don't speak so frequently, which is evaluation and assessment, you know. And I think you have reached something important, and it's like to promote an awareness about evaluation among students. So what's the implication you think this project has in terms of the system, in evaluation as a system, especially regarding self-assessment, which is something pretty difficult, especially with teenagers?
want to start or me? Okay, so well, as I mentioned, well, that was one of the problem statement, and that was because why we decided to start like searching and researching more about assessment and feedback, because now in general schools, assessment is just about the final grade or, well, receiving feedback at the final moment. So I consider that one of the implications is to let teachers know that assessment is it's not a process to be at the end, a summative process, but something to do it during the process. So that would be one of the implications, and also not to do the evaluations and the assessment in the same way always, like with a final exam or with a final activity, but try to change, not also using these type of tools, but being creative about using it with another way. That, okay?
I invite you to go in deep with this because you have opened a very important door, yes, which is regarding the consciousness students have an evaluation. So I invite you to go in deep
Of
because
course.
you have done a great job.
Thank you. Thank you so much.